river of stone. Perseverance amid obstacles. Soft waters carve what pride cannot own. A river begins as a thin thread of water without a name, fragile enough to vanish under noon heat. Yet it keeps moving, and in its quiet insistence, it discovers both its bed and its destiny. Because what endures does not ask the mountain for permission. It learns the mountain's shape and finds a way. Marcus Aurelius put it plain, what stands in the way becomes the way. And so the river makes a teacher of the stone, not an enemy. I hold that image when the path ahead looks like cliffs and thorns and locked doors, because the lesson is not violence, the lesson is persistence, shaped by intelligence, pressure guided by patience, softness that unseats hardness by refusing to stop. A river does not lecture a boulder. It studies the edges, measures the drop, keeps its rhythm, and lets the years do what hours cannot. And this is how a life becomes a channel rather than a puddle that evaporates at the first hard noon. I tell myself that perseverance is not a sprint in armor. It is bare feet that learn the pebbles by touch. It is breath that learns the length of the hill. It is a will that returns and returns until the return itself becomes power. At work, there are days when the gate is closed and the guard does not look up. An approval stalls. A file sits in a silent inbox, and a plan turns into sand in the palm. A younger version of me would push louder, break rhythm, and spill energy into the air. But a river learns to narrow at a choke point, to deepen rather than splash. So I break the boulder into pieces of work the way water breaks a year into days. Set one clear action, do it without ceremony, record the done thing, and move the next stone by an inch. Praise or blame are weather, cadence is the current, and the current is mine to keep. The paradox is simple. The slower my breath, the faster my path. Urgency without panic is how water travels steep ground without tearing itself apart. In the home, there are weeks of thin patience when words pick up sharp edges like broken shells. A look is misread, a sentence lands hard, and an old wound opens just enough to sting. The river image helps here too, because volume is not power in a house, timing is, and shape is. I soften my voice first, because water does not cut stone by shouting. It cuts by touching the same edge, with the same motion, with the same calm. I let silence settle like silt, so the water clears, and the next sentence can see where it is going. I remember that a deep channel protects its banks, so I protect the person rather than the point. Conflict is not a wall, it is a bend. And bends are places where relationships either undercut or build banks. And my choice is in the angle of my words and the length of my breath. I choose roundness, not to lose the truth, but to carry it intact. When failure arrives, it feels like a dam. But most dams are only ridges that look taller up close. I walk to the side where the ground is lower. I climb with smaller steps. I listen for the faint sound of water on the other side, knowing that the logic of movement is patient. If there is a downhill somewhere, water will find it. My task is not to demand a fall where there is none. My task is to keep moving until gravity makes me a gift. There is dignity in motion that does not draw attention to itself. And there is strength in not needing the drama of triumph to keep going. Endurance is often mistaken for stubbornness. But stubbornness is hard and brittle, whereas endurance is supple and exact. Stone resists and cracks. Water adapts and arrives. The river has no spine and still holds a line. This is not weakness, it is mastery. Because mastery is not what can dominate for a minute. It is what can remain for a long time without becoming dull. The river teaches that gentleness, applied long enough, is stronger than eruption, and that a steady will wastes less life than fury. Most of our fiercest opponents are not people but conditions. Fatigue that blurs the letters on the screen. Doubt that fogs the morning. The memory of an old insult that rises like cold water to the chest. A river does not fight fog or cold. It keeps going until the valley warms. I am allowed to arrive later than I planned. I am not allowed to dry up because I am embarrassed to be seen as slow. There is a craft to moving through resistance without eroding myself, and craft begins in the hands. I rest my palms on the table to ground the nerves. I straighten the spine like a mast. I let the eyes settle on a single point so the thought can gather. Then I move my focus like a paddle. One stroke, one stroke, one stroke. Insistence is a kind of music, and music is counted, not yelled. The way a river counts is inches and minutes, not miles and years, which is why the river wins. To outlast, it is enough to be exact and to continue. Sometimes the stone is not outside at all. Sometimes the stone is my own demand that everything be smooth and fast. That stone gets polished by acceptance, not by scolding. Acceptance is not inactivity, it is accurate posture, like a boat trimmed to the wind it actually has. In that posture, progress reappears and morale returns. Quietly, the way a spring returns to a dry bed after long rain. I do not need to feel heroic to be effective. I only need to feel my breath and keep the oar in the water. The Stoics knew that judging the rock wastes the day, and that meeting the rock shapes the day. Seneca would say the exercise is itself the prize, because the exercise makes the person who can use the prize. Epictetus would point to the difference between the rock and the rudder. The rock is not up to me, the rudder is, and my hand is already on it.
Marcus would advise me to look straight at the fact, remove the drama, and do the next right thing. All three would agree that the river reaches the ocean not by noise, but by direction. I practice a brief pause when pressure climbs. Inhale to 4, hold to 2, exhale to 6. Not because numbers are magic, but because counting is a rope I can hold when the mind wants to slip. In the space that follows, the voice I use with myself softens, and a sentence appears that is lighter and more exact, and that is usually enough to turn the rock into a curve. To others, it looks like nothing happened, but inside, the current has found its bed again. There is a practical ethic in this. When work jams, I ask which stone I can move with one hand today. When love chills, I ask which honest word I can say with a warm tone, and then give time the dignity to do its part. When the mind scatters, I remove one noise from the room, put one tool back where it belongs, and begin one task whose end I can feel with my hands. The river favors what can actually be done, and the done thing gives back heat. I also train my patience on small scales so it is there on large ones. I finish the last 2 minutes of a run even when I want to stop at the door. I sit for 3 breaths after I think I am finished sitting. I wash the cup before I leave the kitchen. These are not chores, they are channels. A life is not carved by occasional floods. It is carved by daily flow, by the repeated gesture that tells the stone who I am. There is a paradox that softens the jaw. The more quietly I persist, the less resistance I meet. Some stones sharpen when struck, but most stones surrender to touch. Anger makes me loud and clumsy. Calm makes me precise. A precise life wastes fewer days, and the river's secret is not hidden at all. It is simply the refusal to waste water on splashing when depth would carry me further. I keep a small ritual for defeats. I let the hands trace the edges of the desk. I name one thing I did that was right, even if the outcome was wrong. I thank the day for revealing a shallow place, and I choose where to deepen tomorrow. Gratitude is the silt that grows banks, and banks hold me when floods come. If I must pass a long season among stones, I practice being the stream that sings while it works. A melody for myself alone keeps cadence honest. I have learned that when the mind hums, the hands remember, and when the hands remember, the will is spared the burden of starting from zero. The river never starts from zero, it starts from gravity and moves with it. I pause here for a breath and a mantra. I flow, I do not stop. Stone is lesson, water is will. I return, and by returning I arrive. I arrive, and by arriving I rest. I rest without quitting. I quit nothing that is mine to finish. There is a small story I keep in my pocket from a night when I walked home after a failure that took the voice out of me. A rain had just ended and the street was black glass. The soles of my worn shoes hissed softly with each step, and at the corner, a gutter held a ribbon of water that could not be seen unless you looked low. It was moving without audience, moving because that is what water does, and I remember thinking that a life like that would be a good life. No performance, no sulking, only direction. I followed the gutter to my door, and the next morning I got up and did a small thing right, and that small thing opened a channel that lasted a week. I learned then that the river's courage is the courage to be ordinary and unstoppable at once. I am the river, I choose to move, I stand by flowing, I endure by returning, I continue whether praised or ignored, I find the sea by refusing to dry up.